Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad, where it's my job to introduce you to people who have built amazing lives for themselves in various foreign corners of the globe. We're talking with expats and thought leaders about moving abroad, remote work, visas, and all the fun and practical knowledge that you need to know to follow in their footsteps. If you've ever dreamed of making a life for yourself overseas, maybe working remotely or embracing long-term travel, retiring or studying abroad, or even just taking a peek inside life beyond your borders, you've landed in the right place. This episode is brought to you in partnership with Wanderers Wealth. One of the greatest challenges and also one of the greatest opportunities for digital nomads, expats, people who are building businesses abroad is in the world of international taxes. It's not the most fun subject to talk about, but it's one of the most important and confusing that I hear about all the time from those of you in the audience. So I've had Kathy on the show before. She's the CEO of Wanderers Wealth. And afterwards, I became a customer of hers because her global tax strategy design course is incredible. It literally walks you through all the steps that you need to take in order to take advantage of the international tax system that is set up to actually help those of us that are living this international lifestyle. So it's highly recommended. You can find the link in the show notes for her global tax strategy design course. Check it out and let me know what you think. My guest today is a true pioneer of remote work and Slo-madism, as he refers to it. Liam Martin is the co-founder and CMO at Time Doctor, one of the leading remote-first companies out there with people spread across the world. He's also the co-founder of Running Remote, which is the largest remote work conference in the world, which I was fortunate enough to just attend in Montreal a few months ago. And he's also a new author of a book also called Running Remote, which we talk a little bit about today. So as someone who has traveled around the world, both by himself and also now as a family man with a young child, he is able to share a lot with us, from digital nomad visas to running remote teams and everything in between. So a lot of fun talking with Liam today. I really enjoyed this one. I hope you will as well. Please help me in welcoming Liam to About Abroad.
A couple weeks ago, it was amazing because I literally put up like a story, me and my wife and my almost 2-year-old daughter, so we could get her on for free. We went to Lisbon for about 2 weeks, and there were like 8 people that popped out of Instagram and my socials saying, "Hey, I'm in Lisbon here too." And it's really awesome because you get that alumnus group of digital nomads where if you really are tied into this community, you're never going to have a lack of friends.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that I think a lot of people are afraid of when they try to venture out beyond their little community where they've lived their whole lives or where they've settled down for the time being. They're afraid that they're going to lose that community. And I've always found that super interesting because that's one of the great myths, right? Is once you step outside that circle, you find this whole wide world of circle that it can be inclusive and connected across the entire globe. And you show up to one place and you're like, you instantly have a community around you. And I've never really fallen into the trap of thinking like, okay, well, I'll be alone if I go to this place. Like there's always somebody around.
Yeah, I've almost never had an instance in which I've put out like, oh, I'm going to Barcelona or I'm going to Lisbon or to Medellin, and I haven't had at least half a dozen people that have reached out to say, hey, what's up? The other thing that's really cool too is even if that doesn't happen for you, you can go to some of these digital nomad or expat meetup and you've got a network of people that are in the same kind of tribe as you and are really excited about, the same type of things as you are. So for those of people that are thinking to themselves, oh, this is scary, I don't want to kind of make that initial jump. To me, I don't think you have any excuses.
Yeah, I agree. Do you recall when, it's funny you mentioned that, because do you recall when you and I met for the first time?
I do. It was both a horrible and a fantastic thing at the same time. We were going to a conference. I'll tell the story. We're going to a conference, and I told this conference, we need Wi-Fi. I need Wi-Fi. I'm going to be doing like 8 calls a day. That was when I was really synchronous. And in part, you guys helped me move more to an asynchronous perspective towards my work. But I said, listen, I need to do like 8 hours of Zoom calls every day. And if those Zoom calls break down, I'm screwed. So they put me about 1.5 miles away from, I don't know if I told you the first part of this story, 1.5 miles away from the the venue. And it was out in the countryside at this beautiful old villa, and they forgot about me. I messaged them because I had no access to anywhere. And I'm looking on Google Maps. I mean, Spanish didn't even work. I downloaded Spanish, but it didn't work because we were in northern Spain, which was Catalonian. And I knew that Igor, who is the co-organizer of Running Remote, would be there in 4 days. So I just thought to myself, okay, this is a good opportunity for me to not eat anything for 4 days and try that out. So that was my longest period in which I didn't consume anything. And it was a really cool experience for me. But then I'm like, okay, 4 days. Igor's here. I'm like, Igor, don't even talk. Get right back in the car. We need to go somewhere to get something to eat. And so we get to this place, the venue, and I'm in line to be able to get some paella. And then like 3 people before me, they run out of paella.
No way.
And I was like, I need to go somewhere else immediately. I got to go get a burger. Like I can't deal with that. And then long term, we ended up actually grabbing a whole bunch of people, going back to that villa. We like cooked up a ton of barbecue. Amir ended up, I was almost a little kind of scared of Amir because I got like two 2-4s. Canada, we call them 2-4s, like a 24 pack of beer. And then he's like, no, we need way more than that. And I was like, there's 10 beer. And he's like, no, we need way more than that. And he grabbed like over 100 beers. And I was like, how drunk do you think that we're supposed to get? And got pretty drunk. It was a ton of fun.
Tons of fun at the Catalonian hillside. I can't believe they forgot about you. That sort of underscores it was not the greatest of conferences, I'm sure, that Time Doctor or Doist ever attended, but it brought us together and we built a friendship and a bond between Time Doctor and Doist over barbecue and beers. So these are where the greatest of alliances are forged, I guess.
For sure. I mean, even off of that, every conference is a really interesting one because I also ended up meeting Joe or John from Mind Valley. I can't remember his name, but I mean, I've been on his podcast about 3 or 4 times and we've built a really fantastic relationship. So, those conferences are very rarely a waste, even if they're not executed on perfectly.
Speaking of conferences, I mean, you guys just finished off the Running Remote event, which I don't think I've had a chance to speak to you since then, but I just want to take the chance to tell you, like, what a fantastic job. That was such an awesome experience. And for people that think it's weird to hear a bunch of remote work nerds be excited about coming together in person, I mean, it was such an awesome experience to get to meet a bunch of people, network, learn, and just connect with all these people who I've gotten to know virtually, but bringing them together in one place there in Montreal was special, man. You guys did a fantastic job.
Oh, thanks a lot. I feel a lot of people kind of poke fun at, which is having a physical conference about remote work.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on here? But the reality is that remote work isn't working from home. And I love that the media has taken that term, work from home, because we can really divide it from what I think is remote work. We need to actually meet in person from time to time. When we go synchronous, like, let's go deep, right? Let's go in person. Let's meet together. Let's communicate. Let's exchange information. And Running Remote is just that place for hopefully the remote work community. At least that's what we've built it for, as opposed to individual companies that have their team retreats every year. So we're just kind of replicating that, but for the greater remote work.
Do you guys do retreats of any kind at Time Doctor?
We do 2. So we do a company retreat every year, and then we do a departmental retreat. So that's generally the most that we want to spend, because those end up costing us quite a bit of money. They're probably around a 7-figure price point when we look at once all the dust settles, which is very, very expensive. But I think that the ROI it's totally there. You can't directly measure it. We actually have looked at things like, does EMPS go up the quarter after have a physical company retreat or not? And it does a little bit. There's some interesting indicators, but fundamentally for us, it's just getting everyone together. And it's a huge perk to work in a company in which you get to basically go on a free vacation for a week or 2 and hang out with some people that, hopefully you've built really deep relationships.
I would actually, so I want to ask your opinion. I agree with you 100%. And you use that word perk. And I'm wondering how far this will go, because I kind of think looking backwards a little bit, like when the Googleplex became a thing and like having a cool office and ping pong tables and beer kegs and bring your dog to work day became like thing. This was like really exciting for people. And it was something that attracted and retained talent. For this next generation of the future of work, do you think the retreat, the offsite, and doing them at a really high level can be something that people look to at a company and say, that's a differentiator, or is it just too much of an add-on?
It's that you bring up a really good point, which is no one's really advertised that in an aggressive way, saying like, do you want to go? You've always had a dream of traveling. And this kind of communicates to the digital nomad side of a lot of remote workers. I actually think, talked about the great resignation happening last year. I think we're going to have the great migration this year when we see that all of these jobs that are now truly location independent because there isn't a scary virus that may or may not kill you. A lot of these people are going to be moving everywhere and they want to be able to feed into that. So like we have, the way that we do it is we identify 3 cities. The internal prep team identifies 3 cities that we want to go to. So like, let's say it's Canggu, Barcelona, and maybe Abu Dhabi. And then we vote on that. And it's a really interactive process with a lot of our team members, be able to get everyone focused and saying, yeah, okay, well, we're all going to go to Abu Dhabi, and everyone's really excited about it. And they think about it for, months beforehand. It is a pretty cool perk because how many people, how many people go on vacation to really interesting exotic locations over a 10-year period? I bet you the average person maybe goes, like, they go to Cancun, but I don't really call that something exotic or interesting. But like, if you said over a 10-year period working with a company, you went to Abu Dhabi, Ubud, Barcelona, somewhere in South Africa, Medellin, all these really cool areas, that would be a huge perk to me. And that's what we provide to our members every year. So it could be a really, really good perk, but we need to actually have blog posts written about it. Like we need people to be like, when you go to the Googleplex and you get the free lunches and the ping pong tables and all this kind of stuff, there were so many articles written about that. Totally. And we need to actually have that for remote work.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that, like, as remote teams and yourself, like you're a world traveler, like I'm coming to you today from Germany and traveling around a good bit myself. Like, I think we can kind of take it for granted sometimes. Like, it's just it's baked into the fabric of our life now, right? But for a lot of people, that's not necessarily the case. And it's pretty exciting to think about joining a company, getting a salary, having fully remote work. And then also, oh yeah, by the way, you get to go on these badass trips a couple times a year. I think it can be a really cool selling point.
Yeah, well, particularly for people that have the travel bug. Yeah. And I think that is, I think there's actually a lot more people that have it, don't have it. I think the digital nomadism is absolutely going to be on an exponential growth curve over the next 36 months. So much so that I ended up actually investing in a co-working space during the drop of the pandemic, because I just believe that when you think about the infrastructure that's required for, pre-pandemic, there were 5 million digital nomads, and now the estimates are that there's about 50 million. And I would probably think that there's going to be about 250 million of them within the next 5. There are some restrictions, right? Like, do you have a first world passport? Are you able to actually do this legally? A lot of people are not. I think these digital nomad visas are doing really great things to be able to make it easier to work legally in these locations, and particularly get large corporates worked into the process. If you can get, like, the world will change when IBM says you can be a digital nomad. And I think actually inside of the digital nomad community, that should be a really clear focus. How do you I was talking with Iwo from Remote How, because he was in Lisbon when I actually flew in, and it wasn't quite clicking for him. And then I kind of told him, like, dude, you need to have KPMG, Deloitte, IBM, Microsoft, the old tier guys to say digital nomadism and remote work is something that we're okay with doing. They're okay with remote work in a hybrid situation right now, which is great. And that's a huge step forward. But once you get to location independence, I think you're going to see a massive, massive influx of people, what I am going to call, or have called, rich, dumb nomads, as opposed to the previous tier of nomads, which weren't making that much money, but they didn't need to because they were happy, right? If you're traveling on $20,000 a year, but you're in a lot of countries that don't need that amount of money, you're very, very happy. But if you're making $250,000 to $500,000 a year, you'll show up in Bali and say, wow, $2,000 for like a 4-bedroom villa with a housekeeper? Yes, please, because I'm paying $12,000 a month for a 2-bedroom in San Francisco. So I think that is just, and I'm seeing it already happening qualitatively, just no one's following that data set. So I think once we do start to see that, I think that's going to be really press-worthy coming probably in the next 12 months.
Well, man, I mean, that's really, that'll be here before we know it. Like, things are moving so quickly now in this space, and I think so much faster than we could have imagined 5 years ago, pre-pandemic. You've been doing this a long time. You've been leading remote teams, traveling around as a digital nomad and such. But I mean, I don't know if you could have foreseen 5-10 years ago where we are today, where we're talking about in 12 months, that kind of reality could be in front of us.
Yeah. I mean, so February of 2020, 4% of the US workforce was working remotely. And by March, that was 45. Like, snap. Just boom. And just everything changed beyond my wildest expectations, to be completely honest. But the issue is that people got a taste of remote work in the wrong context. And I think this is actually why there's this big pushback towards remote work. I don't know if you saw the newest data that just came out from US government. And, you can use the US numbers as a really good corollary to most other Western countries. But we're at 7% of the US workforce currently working remotely. But if you include hybrid, we're at 30%. And those numbers are actually now peaking their way back up. So we've hit basically remote work like salinity point or back to office salinity point, and now we're pulling ourselves right back up into that curve. There was a really good, at the Running Remote conference, there were these guys that Slack wrote this book, How the Future Works. They handed out at the conference, and they have this really awesome data set where they query 10,000 companies every quarter on remote work. Wow. So they're now starting to see the numbers pull back up, which is really interesting and cool. We're past, I think, the back to the office wave, and now there's going to be counterculture. Hey, I don't really want to work in an office. You kind of dragged me here the entire time. I'm pretty much done. I'm going to go find a job somewhere else.
Man, there's so much that we can do, I think, to help nudge it along. And that's really exciting to hear that we've kind of hit that. I think we had that spike, right after the pandemic began. Like you mentioned, 45%. Now we're at 7% and now climbing again. And what I think it does, obviously, there's the basics. People have access to work when they may not have if they're living in a rural area or something like that. But also for people that are listening to this podcast and are really interested in location independence, digital nomadism, traveling, being an expat, living in another country for some time, it opens up so many doors for them. And one of the things that I am always really interested to learn from people like yourself who have been doing this longer than most is what can people do now in today's environment to prepare themselves for that kind of lifestyle? And maybe if you could provide some context about your history as a nomad, as a founder, as someone who's been doing this for a long time from various corners of the world.
Sure. So I consider myself a Slo-mad. So I'm spending 3 months in a location at minimum. I don't want to necessarily advertise them too much, but it is a great product. If I'm moving to a new location, I'll land usually at a Selena, and they're co-working hostel, high-end co-working hostel spaces. So you can get a good single room for about $100 per night. And I'll usually take a week there. If I can, I actually book out co-working for an extended amount of time because you've got a massive digital nomad that's always rotate through that co-working space. And then from there, I'll just start hammering Airbnbs and then going in person to be able to see the location. And that's where I'll book a long. So I very rarely book a long-term stay without seeing the space myself. I've tried that before and it didn't work. They say we have good internet, but gotta actually run your own test to be able to confirm that, those types of things. But before you go, to me, you need to be able to make sure, number one, you've got a really good source of income. And that's either that you have a remote work agreement employer, which I by far the best, or you're generating at least $2,000 US per month for you to have enough stability to be able to travel to some places that have historically been digital nomad. So you need to be able to have that stability in place. I've had so many people that I've seen them at meetups and they're like, oh, yeah, I just started my digital nomad life and, they're 2 months into it and they have no job. They're burning cash. And I know that they're just going to be flying back wherever the hell they came from 6 months later because they just don't have the ability to turn this into a long-term lifestyle. And for me, that's what I'm really interested in is don't make this a gap year thing, make this a lifestyle thing, right? Like turn this into something that can be sustainable because it truly is probably, in my opinion, one of the most valuable things that you can do in your life is the ability to be able to travel and generate income at the same time. One of my most respected writers, or the writers that I respect the most, is Mark Twain. And back in the 1800s, he was really the first digital nomad. He traveled to 42 different countries, which was incredibly difficult, by the way, at his time, because there were no planes. You had to jump on a boat to be able to get anywhere, and trains. And it was very, very difficult for him. But his perspective was that travel enriched his mind and his body in ways that, other experiences not. So I think it's really important to be able to do that. And there's never been a cheaper time in history to be able to get that type of an education.
Yeah, take advantage of the opportunities, right? I mean, I think for myself, like I had to make so many sacrifices to obtain location independence and work that I could take on the road with me and live this lifestyle that I live now. And the very awesome thing, I think, is that people that are working for you, people that are working at Doist, and hopefully in the future, the IBMs and KPMGs of the world that crave this independence and freedom, I think the opportunity to do so now is just at your fingertips, and it just takes reaching out and grabbing it. And then, like you said, I think preparing a little bit and not just winging it completely. Another big thing that I think people often overlook is visas and how long they're going to be able to stay someplace and what it's like hopping from one country to another. I made some mistakes in the past. And so anyway, I mean, I think just doing some prep work ahead of time can go a long way.
Yeah. Well, if you want to get into that side of it, generally I would stay in a location less than 3 months if you've got a lawyer. If you haven't set up an EOR, which is lawyer of record, lawyer would work with you on to be able to make sure that you're legally allowed to work in that particular area. That's super important. But then I also think, so there's this debate right now of, do we go with EORs or do we go with digital nomad? And I actually think that digital nomad visas would be a better long-term solution for the massive influx of people that are interested in becoming digital nomads, because EORs cost money and the employer is the person that has to pay for it, not you. I mean, you could voluntarily maybe ask, oh yeah, I'm going to pay $500 a month to be able to have an EOR so that I can. But lawyers are pretty terrified of this stuff. Like, I've been in rooms with large corporates, and when they talk about their remote work agreements, it's almost never about like, oh, well, how should we work remotely? It's like, can we work remotely legally? Because we have $1 billion worth of payroll tax issues sitting above our head that we have to figure out, as before we can even start conversation. So the digital nomad angle, I think, is actually the best way to do it. And they're all firing up right now, which is super cool. Some of them are kind of dumb. I looked at the Bali one, and it's a 5-year visa, but I think you have to hold like $100,000 escrow. I don't know how many people have $100,000 in escrow you just literally give the government of Indonesia $100,000. And that's basically to ensure that if you get in a car accident or hurt yourself or anything like that, they can basically stabilize you and get you out of the country. That's not their problem. But that's still so much money. Like, very, very few digital nomads can actually afford that. So they need to kind of make switches to that. But once they do, man, the world's going to be your oyster. And you're going to be, if you have a Western passport, you're going to be able to travel wherever.
It's funny you mentioned Bali. I mean, Bali in that particular instance seems so funny to me as well, because I mean, I think you spend a lot of time there, if I'm not mistaken, and we know people that spend a ton of time there. So I don't really understand the drive, why people would go that route, like why the government even thinks people would go that route when people are already nomading. And I mean, it's a nomad mecca.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of don't ask, don't tell, unfortunately. Yeah. In the vast majority of digital nomadism, there's a lot of don't ask, don't tell. And the government knows that that's the engine of their economy. And yet they've set up such a stupid program off the mark that no one will be able to afford. I was really surprised that they went that direction. And there's other countries that are saying like, yeah, listen, prove to me that you make over $30,000 a year. Like, show me your payroll slips and you're in. Like, that's good. You're also the biggest part of this, which if you're looking at digital nomad visas, we did a big video about it, 27 different ones that I think are the best. Make sure that digital nomad visa relinquishes tax authority. So that's super, super critical, because you don't want to go to a country for 6 months and then all of a sudden the country says, oh, well, you owe us income tax for the months that you were working there. Right. And there are some digital nomad visas that don't put that line in, and there are others that do. You just want to be able to go into a country where it's like, we're not going to tax you. Like, here's $5,000. Here's my visa. I get to chill here for a year, tax free. And you got to deal with your taxes from, where you were located. If you're American, as an example, you always have to pay your taxes. But if you're Canadian, there's like tax of geographic-based taxation. Maybe this is too nerdy for everybody, but it's really important that people figure it out, because if you don't, then number one, your employer actually gets the brunt of this, because they very rarely go after the employee. They go after the employer for payroll taxes because they can get that money from them. And the larger the company is, the more they're going to go after them, because they know that they have pockets. If your org's like 10 10,000 employees, like at Microsoft, they would be like, oh, well, you have an office here. I'm just going to use KPMG, even though it's not. You have an office here, KPMG. So we're just going to sue the office. We're going to sue that KPMG. Like that employee was working for KPMG Spain, as an example, and wasn't working for KPMG US. And we charge more tax here, and there's fees connected to it, and because you didn't do it properly that way, that kind of thing. So really important to be able to have in that Nomad visa. We're not going to tax you.
Dude, that is so important and not something that I realized at all. Like I'm not having to deal with that off the top of my head. So I had not actually thought about that line. We'll be right back to the show after a quick break for a note from our sponsor. This season is brought to you by my good friends over at Insured Nomads. They're the absolute best in the business when it comes to providing health, travel, and medical insurance for nomads, expats, and really just all forms of world travelers. I know insurance is often something that's overlooked when we're fantasizing about traveling the world, but it's absolutely necessity that we address this because often the policy you have in your home country isn't going to cover you while you're abroad. And it's also a requirement, as a lot of people may not realize, to actually buy private travel or expat insurance, as it's called sometimes, to obtain a visa or even enter certain countries. So fortunately, there are companies like Insured Nomads to help us with this. Not only do they have excellent coverage and great prices, but they're also providing a first-class experience with additional perks and best-in-class technology via their app. It's an amazing experience. I can't recommend it enough. Now, this is a company that was built by world travelers for world travelers. So they know what it's like to find yourself in a difficult medical situation abroad, and they want to keep you from having that same bad experience. So the next time you're planning a trip abroad, whether it's for a week or a lifetime, check out Insured Nomads via the link in the show notes. If you've made it this far into the episode and you're still enjoying yourself, then I would love to ask a quick favor. Open up the app that you're using to listen to this podcast and leave a quick review. You can do this in Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and really just about any platform that allows podcast listening now. If you can't find that in the interface of the app, then scroll down in the show notes and find ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, and you should be able to leave it from there. Thanks so much, guys. We really appreciate it and hope you enjoy the rest of the show. You mentioned you made that video. It would be awesome. We'll link to that in the show notes. Off the top of your head, are there any digital nomad visas in particular that you like from this standpoint or really any standpoint?
Yeah. So Costa Rica is coming out with a really good one where you just have to prove income and that's it. And they are not going to tax you. But Costa Rica has 1% income tax. So you're good.
I hope they tax me.
Yeah. I mean, like 1% would be awesome.
Yeah. I welcome that.
Yeah. And then most places in Caribbean islands are literally saying we're just going to rescind all of our tax obligations. Thailand is thinking about one from what I remember, or they've come out with one where they're going to rescind tax obligations. I think generally that's the way that everything's doing right now, but it is, again, it's just important to check fine print. Oh, Croatia is also a really great location, and they are in their digital nomad visa. They are rescinding tax obligations. From what I remember, I'm not a lawyer, nor do I play one on podcasts. So please do this research yourself. Do not just trust me and go for it, because I don't want you coming back 6 months saying, hey, you told me this and it's not true.
Do not sue Liam. Caveat here. He is not a financial advisor nor lawyer. I am, we actually have a really awesome episode about one of our most popular episodes is from a couple seasons back about the digital nomad visa in Croatia. Jess Romano was on here and shared her whole story about going through the process. She was one of the first people to get it, and they made it super easy. I think they really set the standard for they've got it passed through their government super quick. They made it really easy for people to apply. You don't have to prove a lot. You don't have to pay taxes. It was all based on the first year, everything on this first 12 months. But so far, that one looks really great. And I'm also really impressed with what Costa Rica is doing. Costa Rica just does it right. I feel like they just do so many things right. And from an expat standpoint, from a digital nomad standpoint, tourism standpoint, they've really done sustainability as well. They've nailed it in a lot of areas.
What I find very frustrating about countries not recognizing the opportunity for digital nomad is there's so many dollars invested inside of tourism. Every country in the world has a massive tourism board, tourism department. But digital nomads are tourists that stay for 6 months. They consume no government services whatsoever. They eat at restaurants, right? They don't have like the roots that you would have if you were a citizen of that. You go in, you spend a ton of money, and also that money is coming from outside of the country. Like you're not taking a job away from anyone else if you're a digital nomad that works for a company in US as an example, and you're in Spain. And so it still doesn't compute in my own mind why they're so resistant towards this process, because it's such a net for their economy. And I think they're coming to that realization quite soon, but it's still a process. And I think we're probably going to see countries like Croatia that are going to see a huge boom in their economy. Yeah. Maybe 5% of their GDP might come from digital nomadism in the future. And a lot of countries are going to look, say, I want to.
Yeah, I think I saw some statistic the other day that said like in Bermuda, which has had like a relatively small number of people come through their digital nomad program, it's already injected over $100 million into the economy with like a pretty low number. Like they've just scratched the surface. And I mean, that's 100 mil that just flowed into the economy that wouldn't have been there otherwise, and without really doing a whole lot. And I think the key there is, like you mentioned this earlier, is to make it easy, make it simple for people to get in, and then also don't try to complicate it with the tax bit, because that's being very short-sighted. Look at at the cash injection that's going to come, and then there's a lot of other elements we could talk about, but just from pure economics, that's where it can make sense for these countries. And I think if they start looking at us in that way, then it benefits all.
Absolutely.
I'm very curious to ask you, I've wanted to ask you this for a long time, actually, and just never popped up in conversation. How did becoming a father change your digital nomad lifestyle, if at all?
It did, in both positive and negative ways, to be honest. So we just went to Lisbon about a month and a half ago. And for anyone that's interested, a little bit of a growth hack, if your child is under 2, they get to fly for free on most airlines. However, if you fly on points, they will not allow you to add your infant under 2 to that point docket. So you actually have to do it after the fact. It was a really complicated process for us that thankfully my assistant handled. I think that there's a lot of business ideas that are actually going to come out of this new evolution of digital nomad. The biggest one right now is education. So I currently live in Canada. I actually live in French Canada, Montreal, Quebec. And there's a lot of really good infrastructure programs. There's like $10 a day daycare, as an example. And that would cost on average $100 a day if I was doing it directly without the government subsidy. There needs to be an education system. And I've actually invested in a couple of these companies where you have the same curriculum in multiple different locations all over the world, and they're all synced up perfectly. So if your kid's in the first grade and you want to do 3 months in South Africa, but then you want to do the next 3 months in Bali, you can move your kid to green school, as an example, in Ubud, Bali, that follows this program, and down to the week, they have the same education that you're going to provide students. This is something that parents will pay exorbitant amounts of money for, so that their children can have like a good, stable education. I know that, I don't know if you've had CEO of Hotjar on.
Yeah, Ken Weary.
But yeah. Ken's been doing this for, decades.
I actually met him also at the same conference I met you at. That's where I met Ken. And yes, he's been on the podcast and shared his story. It's awesome.
So those are I think for digital nomadism to continue to expand, you actually need those other aspects to infrastructure to continue on with it, because the reality is that the vast majority of digital nomads are unmarried, single people that don't have children. I don't know what the real number is, but I would probably say it's 90% plus. And there are so many people that want to pursue digital nomadism, but because they have children, they really can't do it at the same level, that just need those extra layers of it. And I take a lot of my parenting kind of goals from Ken. I'm really aspiring to go in his direction, where he was telling me his kids were learning ancient Egyptian history. So they just flew to Cairo for 3 months to go in the pyramids and check it out. That's so cool. That's the dream, right? Think about that as an educational background. It's amazing. It's awe-inspiring. And so to me, just offering my child these types of opportunities, it's such a huge advantage. And I think actually a huge advantage in the market too. Because if I have Stella, who's 2 years old now, and she's 20 and she's like, yeah, I've been to 40 different countries, spent more than 3 months in 40 different countries, and like I can speak 7 different languages, and I know everything about anything. That's just going to make her so much more of an effective human being, let alone an employee inside of an organization. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. It's like I'm a little frustrated that the platforms are not in place, and that's the thing that I want to be able to make sure over the next 12 to 24 months got that infrastructure in place where if you have a kid that's in the first grade that doesn't that digital nomad.
I love that. And I'm also a huge fan of following these companies that are trying to evolve and iterate on that space. I've been following Boundless Life, which is one in particular that I really like, creating these multi-month programs with education looped in, and you travel as a group to different places around the world. And Ken's story is so inspiring. I mean, yeah, like the Cairo one you were mentioning, he told me they were studying marine biology. And so they went to Roatan, one of the scuba diving hotspots in the world, and spent a bunch of time scuba diving and studying marine biology there with his kids. And you're like, what, how can you argue with that experience? They're learning multiple languages, they're interacting with people around the world, which is becoming a very critical skill to have, being able to communicate across cultural and language barriers in today's workforce. So I feel like it's like the ultimate education actually, but somehow still kind of viewed as like alternative. And it'll be interesting to watch how that evolves over time, I think.
Yeah, to me, I mean, I would absolutely be hiring those types of people if they came across my desk. They just don't currently exist in current workforce. So I think that we're at a massive opportunity right now. And I think that there are a lot of businesses, like I believe that there will be an education program that pops up, either Boundless or one of these other companies that will easily be a multi-billion-dollar company within the next 24 months. And so you've just, as that influx, those influx of great migration, rich, dumb nomads show up and say, I was chatting with a friend of mine who's a digital nomad yesterday, who actually comes to Montreal for the summers. Summers are world class here, and he spends a lot of his other time in Thailand. So he spent the winter in Thailand and summer here. He was telling me that he spends $40,000 a year per kid for their education, right? Like, this is not cheap. Like, this is expensive stuff. And so he put them into American international school. There's like the French international school, British international school, American international school. And these are all just different curriculums, but unfortunately they don't sync properly yet. And to me, they could totally solve their problem by just saying, well, there's actually a timeline and you're not allowed to kind of just decide to teach module 6 first. You have to go in order, because that would solve all the problems and everyone could go wherever the hell they wanted to go. But, there will be a kind of Netflix of education for childhood educational development, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to watch that unfold. Did you guys touch on this at all in the book in Running Remote? I know I told you I wouldn't like drill you on a bunch of questions, but about this. But I mean, I'm really fascinated by the whole fact that you guys somehow carved out time to write a freaking book called Running Remote, that while you're doing the conference and running companies and trying to be a full-time digital nomad. So kudos to you for that. And I do want to take some time to learn a little bit more about what the core of the book is about and who it's for, because I have a feeling it's got to overlap with the type of people that are listening here today.
Well, you actually, you and Amir inspired me to a degree with regards to the amount of time that I had. One of the big unlocks that years ago was either you or someone else. It was when I was interviewing all of these asynchronous organizations, which is the thesis of the book. Basically,
I'd like to take credit. Let's just say it was me.
So the statement is, you do not own a position, you inhabit a position. So I am not the CMO of the company. I currently inhabit the role of CMO of the company, which means at any moment I should be able to delegate that responsibility to my direct reports, and effectively no one will miss. Actually, you know who it was? It was Yob from remote.com, when I think about it now, because he was talking about at his time at GitLab, he left GitLab because his wife was going through troubles through their pregnancy, left 3 months, and no one knew that he had left. Like, the systems were that good that everything just happened. And a lot of people would get nervous from that, but he said, wow, the system actually works. Like, the organization is autonomous, and individual is not necessarily a critical part of that entire organization. We've built such redundancies inside of the organization that we can pull one or two pieces out and it will still function. So that's what I did for the book. I had an offer from HarperCollins. And so, it was a really good opportunity, fantastic publisher. And I said, I'm never going to write a book. And the company said, you should really write this. Like, it's really important. There's so many books that are coming out about the subject. And I said, well, I'll only write the book if I can write the book about remote work that's not about remote work. And they were a little bit apprehensive about it. I actually wanted to call the book Async, wanted to have remote title. But it's really the thesis that there was this methodology, this way of building a business that dozens, if not hundreds of companies figured out over a decade ago, which I'm calling asynchronous management, that we now are using to be able to build companies at scale that very few other organizations can match. And we interviewed a ton of companies in the book that really kind of focus on it. And we show these success stories of all of these remote pioneers. Amir is one of the people who's the CEO and founder of Doist, recognizing that asynchronous management was a forcing function before the pandemic because you have employees in 50 different countries all over the world, really difficult for you to be able to have synchronous conversations with them. So they had to build a new way of managing organizations, which just happened to be an incredibly successful way of running remote orgs. And that's the thesis of the book. And I was able to take a year off to be able to do it and not like completely off. I would say I reduced my work hours in my regular job from about 30 hours, 10 hours, freeing up 20 hours per week to be able to work on the book over the last So it has been a labor of love for me. And we've always been talking about asynchronous organizations. I remember 2018, we had a really big debate at Running Remote about asynchronous companies. And no one's written a book on the subject. It doesn't exist, right? There is no playbook outside of blog posts on, Doist's blog. There's stuff. GitLab has written a lot of great stuff. There's some stuff on Basecamp, but no one's really written a definitive async 101 onboarding document. And I hope that there's a 102 and a 103 in the future that other people kind of pick up and move forward with. But the real goal here is there's a way of building a business that's way less stressful because you're not constantly interrupted by people asking you questions because the platform is effectively the manager inside of asynchronous organization. And I'm really excited to be able to get it out into the real world. Probably people that listen to your podcast know of it a little bit, but in corporate America, you have to talk to people inside of your organization to be able to get them to succeed. And I said, well, we do talk to people. We just talk to people in a different way that's way less stressful and way less synchronous than the way. That's the thesis of the book. I'm so excited to be able to get it out into the real world. It has been something that I know you as a marketer, you probably haven't really experienced this yet. But for me as a digital marketer, you usually try stuff and you fail. You try something, you fail. You try something, you fail. I've never done something where it's I work on something for a year and a half and then it may fail. Usually for me, the most I'll work on something is a month. Oh, we'll try this new blog post methodology, or we'll build this YouTube series, and then we'll just see if it works, right?
And it's iterative, right? You can take baby steps, and you can edit the process as you go.
It is the definition of waterfall. It's not an agile marketing, methodology at all, because you have to build this thing that just takes a year out of your life to write and get right, and then it may completely fall on its face. I think it's going to do okay. The bulk sales pre-orders have been pretty nice as it stands now, but the biggest thing that I need to figure out for people is how they can get their heads around asynchronous management, because as of right now, it is such an alien concept that, when I tell people async, I actually did a conference with Nacho in the Canary Islands. And I was talking about asynchronous management, and I'm halfway through the presentation and I'm seeing a lot of weird looks in the audience. And I had to pause and I was like, how many of you guys have never heard about asynchronous work? And half the people put up their hands. And I thought, oh crap, I just spent a year writing this thing. And the one group that I would think would be totally understanding of what asynchronous work is, half of them didn't put their hands up. So we've got a lot of work to do, unfortunately. Hopefully the book.
We're still educating the early adopters, which is cool to be on the front. You're on the front of that wave and have been for some time. I've heard people say that writing a book is the hardest thing they've ever done. And you've done some challenging things business wise in your life. Would you agree with that or disagree?
Yes.
Yeah. Wholeheartedly.
You could, if you pay me $3 million, I'd write another book.
Okay. All
Like
right.
it is very stressful. I remember having a meeting actually with my copy editor, and we work on our Google Doc, and he was a layman towards asynchronous work. So I really had to educate him on how to actually write the book asynchronously. But we were working on this. I was working on this one page all day where I was trying to break down the concept of the platform is the manager. And he pinged me and he's like, hey, dude, been working on the same page all day. Like, what's going on? And he's seeing that I'm deleting. We jumped on for a sync call, which is why I think actually shouldn't be 100% asynchronous. Like there are times that you should jump into synchronous conversations.
Totally.
And I described the problem to him. And then he said, oh, well, isn't it kind of like platforms the manager? And I was like, of course. Yes, that is. And he said, listen, in the future, just describe it. And then I'll process that through and turn it into something that, is a lot more elegant. So very, very difficult for someone who writes emails all day long and process documents. This was a very difficult way to write, but I hope that everyone.
Oh man, I'm sure people will. I mean, I think it's like you said, you alluded to this. We're still, even the people that have been doing this a really long time are still educating themselves on how to do this correctly and the doors that it can open for all of us. There's people that are listening that want to be digital nomads. There are people that are wanting to convert their businesses to remote or take their business offline and on the road with them. It's books like these. It's great blog posts out there. It's great videos out there. It's this building in public that is allowing people to start living this dream. And so it's super important that these kind of stories are shared. And I'm excited to check it out myself. Where should people go to find the book? Like, where's the best place for them to buy it?
Easiest place is to go to runningremotebook.com. We've got all the links there. And if you buy through there, you'll also get access to a digital course, a bunch of really great free pieces of software from companies like Trainual and Fellow and a GitLab and a bunch of other companies. So definitely check out runningremotebook.com. And then outside of that, if you can't afford the book or to go to the conference, just go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/runningremote. All the talks are up there for free, including Chase's. So you can go and check him out. It's, I think, a masterclass in remote work.
Yeah, there's so much awesome content. I learned a ton being there in person in Montreal, and then to peruse through the catalog that you guys have built up there. There's just so many nuggets of gold. So yeah, highly recommended for anybody wanting to adopt more of a running remote style to their business, whether it be large, small, whatever. It's really applicable to a lot of different sizes and genres. So Liam, man, I got to get you out of here. This was awesome. I loved learning a little bit more about your past and about the book. Huge congrats. That's awesome to see that it's finally coming out, and I can't wait to read it myself. So thanks again. And is there anywhere else that people should go to find more about you? We'll put all this in the show notes, but while we've got them listed.
No, because I'm going to be promoting this book for the next 3 months. But at Liam Remote is generally what I'm on all the socials. So you can grab me there.
Okay. All right, perfect. Well, we will link all of the above in the show notes, so feel free to click around and find out more. Mainly, go find the book and support. Awesome, man. Great to see you. Thank you as always, and we'll catch up again soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are in the world. Once again, I'm Chase, and this has been another episode of About Abroad. For those of you wondering how you can best support the show, I have made it super simple for you. Just go over to the show notes of the episode that you just finished listening to and click on one of the two following links. aboutabroad.com/newsletter to get our monthly newsletter, no spam, guaranteed, or ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, where you can quickly and easily leave a review for the show. It's not just important to me, it also helps more wanderers just like you find us. Finally, don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, and we will see you again next week. Thanks again. Hasta luego, amigos.